and Lonnie. Lonnie is going to be his conspirator, I guess would be a good word, is any conspirator. Okay, so what I would like to do, let's go ahead and get started. Do you know how many people we have in the chat room?
Looks like a total of 6.
So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have enough for
1, 2, 3, 4.
Do we have enough for a forum? Do we have 10?
That's everybody in the room.
All right. Okay, so we're good to go. Okay, so this evening we have, I'm just going to read off the people that are running, and then we're going to also take nominations, or if someone wants to volunteer themselves, we can do this. So for president, we have Tim Clark, vice president, Doug Christensen, treasurer, Jerry Hyatt, secretary, Eric Holland, editor, Rebecca Lewis. And for members at large, we have 3 newbies that are going to be running, and there's only 2 openings. So we will have to vote on this for sure. And that would be Bill Lytle, Jason Keys, and John Shim. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and open up for nominations at this point. Does anyone want to run for any office? Now, don't be shy. Understand that this is part of the way this thing works. And if we don't try to keep it open, we're going to be lacking, in a lot of things. We have to keep an open forum here. So are there any nominations for any office? Okay, that's the first peg. Okay, the second one, I'm going to say the same thing. We need to do it 3 times, I believe, for Robert's Rules of Order. And so I'm going to ask one more time. Anybody? Okay, last call. Okay, so I think this is going to be it. Yeah, towers. I think we have a pretty good group here, but I was hoping to get more. Go ahead, Jeff. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so be it. Okay. And then we're going to have a vote here. We'll do just a quick vote on the nominations for these things, and all in favor, say aye. Are there any?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposing? Okay, so do we need to approve this?
We do have to elect the members at large, so.
Please.
We have to elect the members at large, and so we have 3 people running: John Schimpf, Jason Keys, and Bill Lytle. The people in Zoom land, if you can get onto the, what do they call it, chat? Get onto chat and send a message to Doug as to who you get to vote for 2. So out of those 3 names, John, Bill, and Jason, please send Doug a message with your 2. Don't send it to everyone. Send it only to Doug. So make sure you click your 2 button to Doug before you send those out. The people in the room here, I'm handing out paper ballots, and they will mark down 2 or less. By the way, I told you guys you had to vote for 2. You don't have to vote for 2. You can vote for 2 or 1 or none. It's 2 or less. And those 2 with the most counts will obviously become the winners. But I'm going to go ahead and hand out the paper ballots to the people in the group. After the presentation, Doug will have counted the paper ballots and the chat votes, and we'll announce the winner after the presentation. Does that seem okay, everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Ed, have you missed anything? Ed?
What's that?
Oh, did we miss anything?
No, you
You're-
got it.
You're our authority on this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just voting here.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently we did the right thing.
I was trying to figure out how to work chat.
Okay, let me.
Wait till the presentation.
Okay.
Any more? Did everybody in this room get the ballot? Did every member in this room get ballots?
Does anyone have a pen?
Does this have to be in black ink? Do we have to stay on the line?
No hanging tests. To the upper left-hand corner.
What signature does it have on that?
They're all covered over there. Oh, look.
Don't look over my shoulder.
Just rolled in.
Go to Georgia, but they can't be sure to sign in.
Let's just throw them in and count them in.
And is it a yes or a yes or no?
I don't know how to spell X.
Okay.
Does anybody in Zoom land need me to type the names out for you?
EX, is John, Jason, or Bill here? Yes, well, Bill's here. Bill's the guy right there.
Okay, here's Bill.
John's got. Jason's got. That's John right there. Jason's the guy in home. I go look at anything. Shake the wood. And work.
Oh. Right. Return again.
It does.
Doug is going to an undisclosed location.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, what's going to happen now is that as everyone goes ahead and votes, Doug will be receiving them on the chat here. And at the end of the meeting, or at least after the presentation, we'll go ahead and announce the winners that we're running, two of the three on that. Okay. I have one more topic I want to talk about in just a minute. Okay, are you guys pretty much done? Okay. Okay, let me give you mine too. Thank you, sir. Okay, so now that this part is done, the next topic I'd like to talk about is that in January, we're going to have our installation dinner. And we have been lucky to get a new room that's larger, better air conditioning, better lighting, better everything. And this is with the San Joaquin County Office of Education. And this is over there right off of Highway 99. I think we talked about it last time, and Arch Road. So what we would like to do in January, this will be the first time we'll get it with our installation dinner, is maybe just have a dinner, not like big time like we did over there in the past before COVID, but at least have some sort of a catered thing come in. And some of us, in fact, all of us in the executive committee here have been looking at different places to get catered. And Angelina's came up and looked at a couple of Papa Pavlov's and not Da Vinci's. But anyway, our fearless leader here, anyway, I'm drawing him. Jerry, this senility is really getting bad here. Jerry has found, in fact, I'm gonna let you talk for a second. Jerry, that's the reason why I couldn't remember you. You're breathing on my neck.
My wife's company used to have catered employee events, and they had a guy come in that served what everyone thought was a pretty good chicken lunch. And it's called Super Chicken Man, and very reasonable. And so anyway, that's another possibility.
Okay, so anyway, Angelina's, I'll just give you a breakdown on this. A basic dinner, which would include ravioli, bread, and salad, is about $9.75. Okay, if you want to add chicken, this would be marsala chicken. It's a breast. It goes to, I think, about $14 or $15. If you want to add tri-tip, 3 slices, it goes to about $24, give or take a few cents. There'll be some tax involved. So I would like to know from those of you in the chat room, we can also open it up here as well. How much food do you think you guys want to eat? Do you want to do the whole gamut for the $25? Or do you want to limit it and not get the beef, or eliminate the chicken, or not have ravioli? Or I'm not sure. What are some of your thinking on this?
It's gotta be all, everybody's gotta go for one thing
It would be a lot less complicated.
for the caterers.
Well, for us too, because as soon as we start changing everything, then how do we get the different costs? I suppose we could do it.
You just told us what the cost was.
I guess, I don't know. So what do you think? What do you want?
I like the ravioli with the chicken. But I don't need red meat now. I'm just
Alright.
recovering from my.
Oh, I get it. Okay,
bypass,
I
right?
understand.
So
I understand.
I'm off the
I
red meat.
understand. Okay, so we'll see if we can cater to, what do you think, Jerry, with the chicken place over there? Can they do that?
I'm not sure what the question is, but they have you can actually look at superchicken.com. They have a $7 meal and a $9 meal, or their basic offerings for catering. And that's like 1 slice of meat, 2 slices of meat. Because they have several different types of meat. Anyway, that's the deal there. Personally, I don't know much about it. My wife raves about it.
Jerry, do you get anything else besides the chicken?
What was-
Anything else
What-
besides-
What do you
Oh,
get besides chicken?
There's like 2 sides. I forget what all else the meal is, but like I say, you can check it out online. It's superchicken.com, superchickenman.com.
So anyway, I guess the most fundamental question is, would most of you want to come to this and have dinner? Because we will need to know ahead of time. If we can. Okay, me too. So what we'll need to know by the next meeting is how many people want to go, and if they'll let us do that, they probably will. I didn't even occur to be honest with you. And if we can do that individually, then we can do it that way and everyone get their own catered meal. The bottom line is if you don't sign up for it, you can't show up there when we're eating and say, I would like a meal, because it won't be there. So everyone will have to make up their mind before all of this
Make up your
occurs.
mind, sign up and pay.
And pay, of course, you have to pay in advance, otherwise it won't get done.
Right.
All right, so
So-
by
so-
next meet, go ahead.
Mike,
Yes,
so as of right now, we only have 2 alternatives, Angelina's and Jerry's wife's friend, or what?
it's open right now. If you have another place you'd like to do, just let me know as soon as possible. And we'll
So
look
we're gonna
into.
do-
Have a
So
vote.
we're not gonna decide upon this until the next meeting is,
Well, the sooner we do it, the better off we are. So I just need to know from you guys, what are you thinking in terms of what you want to eat or what we
Well,
can
it's-
do?
but it's a group decision, and we're not gonna be together again as a group until December, show and tell,
Well,
so.
one of the ones, if you guys trust Jerry's wife, which I think is not a bad deal. One had to live with it, not us. But that's a pretty reasonable price on that, and the food sounds like it's pretty darn good. That might be one of the ones to go with. That or Angelina's are the two that we've had the most experience with. It seems to be the one. If you have another one like Pavlov's, am I saying that right? I can't remember. Papa Pavlov's.
Food there is great.
The food's great. It's a little bit more expensive.
Really?
A lot more expensive.
Yeah. So if everyone wants to do that, remember, it's just a quick meal and we're just gonna have a good time with, we have a very special guest that's gonna be speaking. It's our very own Rebecca Lewis, and she'll be talking about what is Atmosphere Titan, I think it was. And I'm gonna fly her over here. So it's really pretty cool to have this. So, I don't think we should be eating for 2 hours. We don't need that much food or that much talk. Well, we would be nice if we could have enough time for her to give a comfortable speech.
I would go with Jerry's wife's friend.
Yeah, well, okay. What about everybody else? What do you think? How about Jerry's wife? Does anyone trust her?
Is that
Is that a motion? Yeah. Okay. Okay. How about Angelina's? Do you have a motion for Angelina's? Okay, well, it sounds like we're good then. Okay, well, if you want to do it this way, it's okay. I think we're okay. You okay with that, Ed?
I'm good with it.
Okay, Raymond? I guess I asked everybody, Paul, Rich, everybody okay? Go ahead.
Beverage restrictions.
Okay, no alcohol. We're not allowed to take alcohol. We can bring in sodas. Okay. And this is something else we need to talk about, that one of the things we can do also, we'll find out about dessert, but if they can't do it, we could always bring in like a large sheet cake or something, which would be minimally expensive. And
Bring in the box of pops.
And a bunch, and we could also bring in just a bunch of sodas or whatever. We'll bring coffee for sure. And I think we can have a decent meal at a minimal cost. on that. So if that's the case, maybe before we leave, you guys, Jerry, do you think we could actually get an idea of some of the things they can order, or should we, let's call and find out first? Yeah, okay, so we'll find out what's available, and then we'll try to get this thing going as soon as possible. So,
What's the possibility of putting an extra page in the email newsletter so that we can have the menu list?
ooh, I don't know about that. What do you think?
Yeah, the next page, I just won't write it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's not gonna run with Jeff's feathers. All right, okay, so anyway, I think we've exhausted the topic at the point, so we'll go with Jerry's wife and then we'll find out what we can do and get on. Yeah. I don't envy you, Jerry, but God love you. That's all I could say.
Yeah, I trust the wife.
Yeah, all right, okay, enough said. So,
Mike, I have another question. Is this gonna be in that room at the Office of Education that Annie showed the executive committee here about a month ago?
I'm sorry?
Is this going to be in the room that Annie Cuneo showed the executive committee about a month ago?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
January 12th.
January 12th, good, yeah. It should work out fine. I think there's plenty of room, there's good lighting, it's a relatively safe place with lots of people around, but those that have seen it, yeah, I think you can attest it's a pretty good place. So,
Yeah, no, that's good.
okay, so let's get on with our speakers tonight, and Jeff, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself.
I can take up the mic.
Don't drop it.
Okay, so
Eric, is where we're at are these appropriate places for us to stand, or do you need us to alter it? I don't see the screen.
Well, during the slide presentation. I can see you both. You're at the extent of both ends of the window of the camera right now. So you're good.
Okay, so are you going to be clicking between cameras and PowerPoint?
No, so
So it's just,
PowerPoint will be up on the screen for all of us here at the extent to see. And then visually see you talking.
how will the
Zoom
people
land
in Zoom land see
Zoom land
this?
See the camera view.
So the people in Zoom land can't see this
Yes.
even right now?
Right now they can.
Oh, okay, good, because we can't. So I can't tell, are we standing where we need to be standing?
But I will also share screen for Zoom land so they can see both you and the presentation.
Right, my question is, since we can't see the screen, I'm asking you if we're standing where we can be seen.
You're good right where you're at.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jeff Baldwin and this is Lonnie Robinson. And he and I and a third guy, Bill Thomas, are the three mirror makers in Northern California that tend to put out the most product. And we're going to be talking tonight about making mirrors from beginning to end. And I get most of my tutorialship from Lonnie. I've just learned a whole new way of making mirrors using Zambuto and Hartman testing, and it is 100%.
Thank you.
Is 100% because of Lonnie, and I have him to thank for this. He's an excellent mirror maker, and I really appreciate his abilities. So did you want to do any introducing yourself before we get going?
Oh, absolutely. My name is Lonnie Robinson again, and greetings from Sacramento Valley Astronomical Society. We have a bunch of meetings, and it's just really great to see you guys, out in person, because we've been doing Zoom meetings for so many years now, it seems like. But it's odd that Jeff calls, me teaching him, because Jeff is my mentor. He's been my mentor forever. From the time that I picked up his website and read all of his documents on how to figure mirrors, and whole thing. So it's great to share our knowledge at least, and have, there's just a few of us up in Northern California. So
My mirrors are better because of Lonnie. They are magnificently better because of Lonnie.
very kind. Yes.
He's awesome. His mirrors are smooth and El Perfecto, and thank you so much for all the help. And I have to be nice to him because he's gonna make a whole lot of masks and jigs for me, so.
True. I have some leverage.
So, I don't.
These guys here.
The
Yeah.
PowerPoint is on the screen at home, I take it. So, this opening slide is a very handsome mirror maker. It's actually in this picture twice, front view and top view there.
I think we need to take a vote on which is the shiniest, the mirror surface or the head. It's a blinding, is it?
This picture belongs to Bill and Bob and Mark. It's a 22-inch at 5.7 that I'm going to be attacking. We're not sure when, maybe February, March, somewhere around there. And it's going to be refigured, but that's just a picture. I don't know why that picture's on there, actually. But that's the product that Lonnie and I make, our large, fairly large aperture mirrors. And so we'll be talking about grinding and polishing, testing and configuring, and the room conditions and the shop conditions, which turned out to be pretty intense. Click. That was Eric's click. There. So Lonnie and I, Bill, all do machine mirror making. I used to walk around the barrel. I am never walking around the barrel being pressed all night. This is Old Yeller in my shop. That is a 40-inch turntable. And it's 2.5 horsepower, get up and go. But the type of machine that is Elgin machine, and Lonnie's machine is a little different. That was your clue to.
Well, we're both Elgin machines, which is the single arm. We don't have two eccentrics. The other machine, the more complicated machine, will have an eccentric that will go and oscillate with the other one, and it makes it very complicated. So essentially, Jeff has the two arms, but it's still the one arm controlling with eccentric.
Well, this is an early picture of my machine. I've updated it since then. So the large disc on the left rotates at a variety of speeds. The disc on the right moves the arm back and forth. The arm holds what's called the quill, which goes down to the tool and the mirror. This is an old quill. I no longer use that barbaric thing anymore. The other thing that's missing on here is a weight release. This has a very heavy quill weight, and that was detrimental to mirror making. So I have since then added a feature that releases the weight on the quill. The two power packs there, one turns the rate for the turntable and the other turns the rate for the eccentric arm. Before next slide, anything you want to say on this before we go on to the next slide?
I was just going to mention that the weight on the arm is very important because you want to have the same square inch weight on each one of the tools. So if you have a very small tool and a lot of weight on it, it magnifies it compared to a large one. And so we have to have very little weight on the quill at all so we can balance all of the same. All right, click. Jeff has quite a balance system on it. He's got a counterbalance cable with a weight that goes over the top. And he's got it down to what, about 4 or 5 pounds now on the, or less?
I'm aiming for 10 grams per square centimeter, whatever it turns out to be.
On the lap, yeah.
Yeah, the book says 5 to 15. I'm hitting right around 10. So this is my hillbilly picture from the 80s. There are many telescopes in this picture. The big red one is a 16-inch f5 that we made. The black one is a 12.5-inch f8 that we made. And also in there, in the trunk and in the trailer is a C14, but just the length of that telescope tells you what a nightmare that is to observe. So the scopes that we make are quite a bit shorter than that. So when you want to make a telescope, a lot of people start with an 8-inch f6. That's like the standard size. But halfway through that, you're always wishing you made a bigger scope. So the questions are, what do you want to look at? How much can you afford? How much will your wife, father, mother, brother, uncle allow you to have in your house? How big can you carry in your car? How much can you lift? those questions are more important. And so the answer to the question, how big should I do, is the largest telescope you can do that satisfies those conditions. And usually you have to break some of those conditions because you'll still want something bigger. So your machine goes up to how big?
22.
22. Mine goes up to 40. I can do up to 46. So I don't see anybody wanting one bigger than that, but I did get an order for one bigger than that. I didn't do it. So everybody has different tastes on how big of a mirror they want to do. I'm not very good at small, slow mirrors, so I avoid them completely. Anything else you want to say on size?
You covered it.
Click.
Isn't that a beautiful scope on that trader's on? I think the comment, I wrote a newsletter article in Sacramento about it, and I think the comment was, I should have gotten a ticket for driving.
Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies rides in that trailer. If you look real close, you can see the banjo boy in Deliverance in there. I'll let you start this one.
Okay. Well, when we're making mirrors on the machine, it's essentially a lathe, a big machine that turns this thing, but it has to turn it really accurately, like a lathe would turn. So we want to make sure that the turntable is absolutely flat when it doesn't do any wobbling or anything like that. And we want to make sure the mirror blank is accurate as well, because the mirror blank has a different thickness all the way around. It's going to wobble as it turns. And every time it wobbles, the tool goes uphill and then it goes downhill. And all of a sudden you've got a twist in the surface, astigmatism. So we want it to be accurately round on the turntable, because when you set the curve, we'll talk more about that on getting the tools going, but when you set the curve on the mirror, every time you change its center, you have to try and reset a new curve. So we want to make double sure that mirror goes in exactly the same place every time you put it in. And it can move a little too as you're working on it. It can slide a little bit around. And if it changes in like an eccentric as it turns, you're never going to get a perfect curve. So I think I just about covered everything there.
Well, we build the turntable top so they don't wobble. We put the mirror disc in and then we run it around with a dial indicator to get it dead center. We're even at the point now where we're using diamond bits to mill the side as it's turning to make a perfect circle. The backs are ground perfectly flat and parallel to the front. And all of this stuff prevents, like you're saying, an astigmatism event. And it only takes a couple of millionths of an inch and the game's over. So we go through these efforts for a very good reason. Okay, click. Okay, so we don't have the curve generating part on here, I don't think, do we? Well, we go through different methods of curve generating. That's where you get the initial curve in the thing. And then we put a grinding disc on and we start grinding the mirror spherical. And it looks like this dude right here. This is Lonnie's 12-inch tool that we use to grind a 16-inch that I'm making a test reference sphere out of. And this just made out of dental stone, and he uses tiles. I use glass, but this is tiles. They're quite rigid and they grind coarse grits, silicon carbide, which is 60 grit, 80 grit, 120 grit, 220 grit, 500 grit. Then we move on to the aluminum oxide, which would be 12 micron, 5 micron, 3 micron. And then it's just a beautifully smooth sphere that needs to then be polished. The hole in the back here is that quill hole that the machine accepts. And so my quills used to look like this. Now I've gone to Lonnie's type, which is a toggle
Swivel pad.
a swivel. A what?
A swivel pad.
A swivel
Toggle
pad.
pad. You can, yeah, you have the words.
I've never known what these are
It's
called.
actually an equipment leveling device.
So as the thing goes back and forth, this is able to rock around and roll around and do stuff, but it just fits perfectly
Can you,
right into that hole. Yes, sir.
what do you got at the base of that one?
It's called a,
That's just a Baldwin on that, or?
okay, right, it's a cylinder. All the way around. My old ones were a ball that fits into a cylinder right on the tool. Problem is, it's very heavy and it was high center of gravity. This is, I don't use this anymore. Mine's only about that long. but it swivels, it's got a low center of gravity, and it now allows it to pivot right at the glass rather than way up above the glass. So this is old school, this is new school, but it fits in that little hole. Like that, and is able to swivel around without dropping, without having too high of a center of gravity. So we have to grind the mirror spherical first. Did I miss anything? Lonnie?
Okay, when you're grinding the mirror spherical, I used to be, one of my hobbies was old cars and finishing them and painting them, you know. And right away I figured out that if you use a fine sandpaper on it, the surface is ripply. It won't flatten it. And the way to flatten a car door is to use like 50 or 60 or 80 grit on a board, and it'll cut it flat almost immediately. And then you use all this finer paper to smooth it over. So what happens is when we use the real coarse grits to create the sphere, that cuts the sphere very perfectly. And it makes the surface, you know, contoured evenly. So there's the second point up here is a balanced overhang. What happens with the tool is it rides just a little bit. We've got two things you worry about. You've got quill offset, which is the tool, how far away from the center it's rotating. And then you've got overhang, which is the amount the tool overhangs the edge of the mirror as it's spinning. And what you have to do is control the overhang to the exact point. We'll call it a balanced edge. And the balanced edge will maintain whatever sphere you started with and accomplished. If you maintain that overhang, the sphere will stay approximately the same. If you increase the overhang, then it starts to try and cut the outer edge a little more, and it increases the focal length. If you move it in a little bit, it decreases the focal length. Each time you move it, you're creating a new sphere. So you have to decide what you want, get there with the coarse grits, and then work to the fine grits to polish out all the grooves and things that are left in the mirror.
So during the grinding phase, we do what's called fixed post. The mirror just spins around a circle and the disc is sitting offset and it's not moving. It just sits in the same spot. But as the mirror turns around, it will auto rotate with the mirror, which causes a neutral grinding pattern, which preserves the spherical shape. And so we're not stroking, it's just riding off-centered as it's spinning around. So if you're in the neutral position, you keep your radius of curvature. If you're a little too long and you want to shorten it up, you can move it in and spin it there, and it shortens it. If you want to lengthen that, you could set up further up in the lengthen it, but just sitting there, not stroking, just spinning around all day long is all it takes to get this thing to become spherical.
And that same overhang goes right through polish as well. So even though the polish won't change the curve very much, if you do get it off center too far, it'll mess up the rest of it. It'll be partly right and partly wrong.
Click.
You say next?
Yeah, click.
Okay.
So Lonnie uses different grits than I use. I use different grits than he uses, but the bottom line is you start with the big stuff, you work with the small stuff.
Correct.
Whichever ones you use. You don't want to skip too far because you can end up going through 60, 80, 120, 220, 500. If you skipped a little bit too soon on there, by the time you get to 500, you might still see some 120 grit pits, and that is no good. So you have to go back. So whatever grit sizes you use, you want to make sure that you thoroughly finish that grit size before you go on to the next one.
And you can use a grit a little bit longer if you've got too big of a jump. You could use this finer grit a little bit longer to get rid of the bigger pits.
All right, click.
Polish, well, test with a laser. What we're trying to do is get this thing ready to figure. We want that polish to be as good as we possibly can get it. So we have a little red laser and you shine it on the surface, and it's just a regular little pointer laser. And in the dark room, you don't want to see any reflection coming back off the surface. You want to see it go through the glass, hit the bottom. So if you move it around the surface and you get a little dust on there, the dust will just flare up in little specks all over. If you've got a pit, it looks the same way. It'll kind of flare up, or a scratch pops right out. And if you try to use a green laser, you'll always get a bad surface because it's just too powerful. It's too strong. And it's kind of dangerous to use a green laser for the reflections.
Well, the theory in this test is if you have a polished glass, the laser will hit it and reflect off And since it's not coming back at you, you can't see it. If it's not polished and there's some pits, then it will scatter the light in every direction, including back to your eye. So the fact that you can see the dot means you're not polished. Once you cannot see the dot anymore, you are polished. At this point, polishing, we are using a pitch lap. And so I dropped something on this pitch lap. So this is the one I brought today. I have a bunch of these in various sizes, but all it is I'm now using Lonnie's Designs aluminum disc with a quill holder. And then we put pitch on this surface, mold it to the mirror. Then this is what we do fixed post spinning with, only the ones we'd be doing would be larger. This is a small specialty pitch, but it takes that finely ground surface and it performs a chemical mechanical reaction between the silicon dioxide in the glass, the cerium oxide in the polishing agent, and it causes the glass to blur and blend and become a reflective surface. It isn't melting. It is something different, but after you do this for, depending on the mirror, it could be 3 hours to 25 hours. Your mirror goes from being a really soft frosted appearance to being a beautifully shiny mirror. So that's what he was talking about with a laser test. You know you're done when you shoot the laser on there and you don't get a return back on it, then you know you're done polishing. So this is a pitch lap that we used to polish with. It's different than grinding.
And when we're done with polish, we want to make sure that it might not be a perfect sphere, which is okay as long as you don't have any defects. So what you don't want is astigmatism. You want to make sure at the end of polish that you've got a good edge, and you've got to make sure that you make sure that the complete mirror is polished out. Sometimes if you get the polish lap a little bit off center or wherever, you can leave the edge or you can leave the center a little less polished. You want a nice even polish on it.
And at this point, we're starting to do our initial optical testing. We use a Ronchi test, which is parallel lines. Light goes through it, hits the mirror, comes back and goes through those parallel lines again. So if we have achieved a sphere, we do a sphere before we parabolize. So if you achieve a sphere, then those Ronchi bars in the mirror are straight, parallel, and evenly spaced. They don't hook at the end. They don't wiggle around. And that's what we are looking for before parabolizing the mirror. So what usually is the case is there's a little turn down edge right at the edge. And that is one of the worst strul killers there is on a mirror. So we either adjust our fixed post spinning, or we start doing a smoother stroke to make the mirror smooth and spherical without a turn down edge. You can also look at the Ronchi bars until if you've got astigmatism, and right now is the time to deal with it. You don't want to postpone that at all. If you have astigmatism, you can either try to work it out or go back to grinding and grind it out and start polishing over again.
Find the cause. Yep.
Yeah. And if you do have astigmatism, there's a reason for it. Usually your machine isn't doing it right, or you're doing something wrong. I mean, mirrors just become astigmatic for no reason at all. Could be because your glass is stressed. We didn't talk about stress in the glass, but that's okay. All right, are we good? This one, click.
Radius of curvature. Everybody know what radius of curvature is? I didn't know when I first took up mirror making, and the guy said it's like you take a big ball and you take the whole surface of the ball with the same curvature of the mirror, and that is the sphere of the curvature. The radius is half of that, of course. So it's interesting that between the parabola and the sphere, they are exactly opposite. So the sphere will focus, the spherical surface will bring all the light back into one place and have the same focal length on each part of the mirror. And we're talking about angled light from the radius of curvature. So if you think about the different sources of light, if you have a light bulb, it radiates out 360 degrees in a circle. So the closer you get to it, the more angled light you're getting on the surface. If you have a star, it does the same thing, but it's so far away that it's essentially parallel when it gets to us. So the parallel being the two types, the sphere and the parabola, are exactly opposite. The sphere will focus at the radius of curvature, but it will not focus at infinity. The star will be just the opposite. It will not focus at the spherical radius of curvature, but it will focus on the parabola. And it's very interesting. I discovered that there's the distance in between those. If you look at the fence across the street, you know, you have to crank the eyepiece way back. You're getting somewhere in between the spherical and the parallel. And if you get like a pine tree that's 4 or 5 blocks away, it's still too close. You're still getting angled light. So you go part way in towards the parabola. And this is what they call the spherical aberrations. You will have distortions in the view between those points. It's not going to be a perfect image until you get to the infinity part.
I just grabbed the data sheet that I worked up for James's mirror. And to make a point, we do all of our testing in the shop at the radius of curvature, not all, 99% of it. It's at the radius of curvature. And this radius of curvature was 136 7/8 inches. And so the focal length on this mirror is 68.43, which is half the radius of curvature. So we can't test mirrors in the shop at the focus unless they're doing what's called autocollimation. It has to be done at the radius of curvature. So you've always got in your brain going, whatever radius of curvature is, focal length is half of that. Speaking of how close can we focus telescopes, when we do star testing on telescopes, we can use a false star. And I usually use a ball bearing across the street to do things like collimating, but I can also star test small slow mirrors with that. But a large fast mirror like a 40-inch f3, the closest I could use for quarter wave testing is about 3.5 miles. So anything closer than that, and it is not going to show a good test because it's too close. So we use stars. They're a little bit further away. Okay, click. Just a bit.
Just a bit.
Well, this is a Lonnie's graphic on what a paraboloid looks like in a Foucault test. So in a Foucault test, you got a razor interrupting, and if you had a spherical mirror, the entire mirror would fade out uniformly. It would just be all gray and dark, whatever. But a paraboloid is not shaped the same way. And there's multiple ways you can compare a paraboloid on a sphere. So this is the standard 71% zone illustration of a paraboloid. So the illusion is, I'm going to move over here even though I'm off camera. Illusion here is that you got a little hill here and then a trough there, and then it dips back around there. And the comparison between a paraboloid and a sphere will show why that's the case. But this is basically what it looks like when you are testing with a razor on a Foucault test scenario. And as you move the razor forward and back, that changes from one thing to another. It's in a future slide there.
And it's a magic light because it ignores the fact there's a hill in front of it. It still looks like it goes right through that hill and illuminates the next hill on the other side.
Well, mirror making is magic.
It is.
There's no science in it at all.
It is.
Just there. Do you want to go next slide or?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
We've got a lot to get through.
There we go. If you,
Yeah, this is the good stuff here.
if you have a razor all the way out, it looks like it's shadowed on one side. And as you move the razor in towards the mirror, these guys start going into different radius curvature zones of different parts of the mirror. And so what we do on a Foucault test is we will move the razor forward and back until we are at a radius of curvature of a particular zone. So right here, we're at the radius of curvature of the center zone. Here we're at the radius of curvature of about the 50% zone, maybe 60%, maybe 70%, maybe 80%. And as we do that, we would mark down on our paper and pencil how far back these things came to a center of curvature.
Laser? You want a laser?
Okay, yeah, thanks. And then we would compare that to where they're supposed to be. And we'll get what's called a tornado graph. And so we would graph at different zones on the mirror where these null images come in. So when you start with the sphere, it's straight across like that. As you parabolize in the mirror, it starts tilting down like that. And the idea is to be below this guy, but above that guy to have a diffraction limited mirror. And so that one there is the perfect mirror apparently. But the trick is to be down the middle of your tornado. The tornado graph is actually called the Mills-LaCroix graph, but it looks like a tornado on its side, so that's what I call it. Did you want to add on this, Lonnie?
So the fun part about this chart is that you're actually looking at a parabola at the radius of curvature, which doesn't focus, remember? So each part of the mirror, part of the parabola has a different focal point. And what we're trying to do is create those errors because we're not checking a star. It's too inconvenient to go outside. So we're testing at a spherical point. And if that were a sphere at the radius of curvature, it would be the same focal point for all. It would null out or blacken the whole mirror. So this is how we're able to, we predict what we want the parabola to be, and then we figure it in, correct. And then we figure it in with these errors on each zone.
Yeah, for you folks at home, that disc up at the top there, that's the null, that would be a sphere. And the discs down at the bottom would be the paraboloids, correct. Okay, next. Okay, so this is the same sphere and the same paraboloid compared. So on the one on the left, you can see that in order to parabolize the mirror from a sphere, we had to lower the middle and lower the sides and leave the 70% zone alone. And that got us our paraboloid. Or the one in the middle, to go from a sphere to paraboloid, we could just work the sides and we will get to the paraboloid. Or the way Lonnie and I do it, we could just work the middle and get to a paraboloid. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. The one on the right tends to be what most people refer to work, because we say when we shorten the radius of curvature of a zone, it is correction. So we talk about overcorrection and undercorrection. So correction is when we shorten the radius of curvature of a zone. And so if you look at the guy on the right, we've done our corrections mostly in the middle and less as we get to the edge. But that is not the only way to do it. The old Texero books would take a pitch lap of the same size as the disc and they move it over the side and start doing stuff. And what happens is it starts wearing down the side of the mirror, which gets you to the exact same paraboloid with a different way of thinking about it. And some people work the middle and the sides. I don't do that. I just work the middle. Not just the middle, but I work the middle the most and work my way out.
Well, the obvious conclusion is that when you do the lower the edge and the center, you maintain a perfect focal length that you want. So if you have somebody saying, I want this exact focal length, that's the way you'd have to do it. But we have the luxury of being able to move the focal length a little bit. So we'll do the last one taking the center. And the real reason, because we want to take the center, is because the edge is probably very close to being perfect because of the spherical work we've already done. So we want to leave that alone. The majority of the mirror's quality comes from the outer edges. That's the majority of the surface of the mirror. So,
but you're with me when we are agreeing that we work the center
exactly
to correct a mirror. Yeah,
exactly.
The other reason is once you have a spherical mirror, that edge of the mirror becomes the datum. It becomes the exact perfect place on the mirror. And we're going to change everything with respect to that ring.
Correct.
Once you start messing around with that ring, usually you're going to get astigmatisms and turn down edges. So once it's good, you just back away from it and leave it alone and make everything else go down. Okay, click. Well, for those of you who like math, a conic section is this. If you have a line, an endless line both directions, you hold it with your thumb and forefinger, grab your other hand and swirl it around in a circle, it sweeps out a conic shape. A cone that way and a cone that way. Now, if I take a plane and slice through it that way, the shape will produce a circle. If I tilt it, I'll get an elliptical shape. If I tilt it more, it'll be more eccentric elliptic. If I tilt it more eccentric elliptic. Now, finally tilt it so that it is parallel to the side of the cone, I get a paraboloid. And if I keep going, I get family of hyperboloids, but the best way to look at hyperboloids is if the shape is parallel to the axis. And as I move it closer and farther from that axis, I'll get bigger hyperboloids, then skinnier hyperboloids and fatter hyperboloids. So there is a circle, an infinite number of ellipses, a paraboloid and an infinite number of hyperboloids. When you start with a telescope mirror, it is a revolution of a circle or a spheroid. As you start correcting it, you get a revolution of ellipses, which are called ellipsoids. When you hit the magic spot, you have a revolution of a parabola, which is a paraboloid. If you overshoot, you will get a revolution of a hyperbola, which are hyperboloids. Which sucks, because once you get a hyperbola, it's like
Hard to go back.
got to go back, and that's going to be real work. So that purple one there, the paraboloid, that's the one that we're after.
One of the interesting things, Jeff touched on it, is that there's only one circle. He called it one single one. And there's only one shape that's a circle, and there's only one shape that's a parabola. But those can be any size, but they are only one shape. The hyperbola and the ellipse, you have all different sizes and shapes.
I'm going to back up a little bit. Given a particular radius of curvature of the vertex, there is only one circle, many ellipses, there's only one paraboloid, and there are many hyperboloids. You can change the radius of curvature and you get more in one circle. But let's say we have a fixed radius of curvature. There's now only one circle. A lot of ellipses, there's only one paraboloid and a lot of hyperbolas. We have a little fudge way though, because if we make a change, we go from 140-inch radius of curvature to 139.9-inch radius of curvature. We can alter it so that's still a good paraboloid. It's not the same paraboloid anymore, but it's so close we would know.
I was just telling Mike that it's quite a challenge to be mirror making with a math teacher. Very intimidating is a better word.
Click. You want to talk about this one?
Sure. We deal with a couple different types of returns on our tests. The miles the crow that we're talking about. And actually, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Millie's LaCroix. It actually does, and we'll talk about it in a couple slides. It talks about focal length or slope of the mirror surface. But these two tests here actually produce and extrapolate the actual surface profile of the glass. So figure XP, if you put in the focal numbers, it will actually give you where the glass is high, where you're supposed to cut it, where you're supposed to polish it down and make it a flat line and bring it to the parabola. 6 tests is the same way. That's just two different types. The figure XP gives you a slider that will allow you to, the quote in there was to offset from the best radius of curvature. So if you got a higher spot and you want to change your figuring process, you can actually alter the curve a little bit, and it makes it a little quicker to get to your parabola.
You would think that the same LaCroix data would give you the same profiles, whether you use figure XP or 6 tests, but you don't. And I tried to download 6 tests on my latest computer, and it explodes when I download. I don't know if it's
a very old program.
So I'm going to talk about figure X because that's what I use exclusively. When you plug in the data from your LaCroix graph, you get an actual physical profile of the mirror. And as you can see, the peak to valley on this is a peak of 18 nanometers and a valley of 0 nanometers. So the surface is a peak to valley error of 18 nanometers, and that's the surface error. So if a wavelength of light is 550 nanometers, then that would make 27 nanometers a 20th of wave. So 18 nanometers would be somewhere around a 25th of a wave, somewhere around there. But that's the surface. And we measure telescope mirrors by their wavefront, and the surface area doubled gives you your wavefront error. So if that works out to about 28th wave on the surface, then I double that, I get about a 14th wave on a wavefront. And if you look at this here, it actually says about a 14th wave there. So that's, by the way, a very good mirror. So that's one of the pieces of information we get from that is the peak to valley error. And this would be a 14th wave. If you look at the other number, the RMS, it said RMS is 5.9 nanometers. That's the RMS of the surface. So the RMS of the wavefront would be twice that, which would be about 12 nanometers, which is about a 50th of a wave. And then if you look at the other numbers, the Struhl ratio, we'll talk about the Struhl ratio in a minute. Your goal is of course be 0.999. This one here is at 0.982. So that's a very good mirror that we're looking at here. If the data is good. Yes, Jerry.
Would RMS be the root mean square?
It would be root mean square. Yes. So we take our data and we average it out, then we subtract all the averages from the data points, then we square them, and then we divide it by how many, then we take the square root. It's just like a standard deviation calculation. But a industry standard would be diffraction limited, and that would give us a peak to valley error of a quarter wave, an RMS of a 14th wave, and a Struhl of 80%. That's the industry standard. Lonnie and I, we're talking 25th wave on the surface, 80th wave RMS, and a Struhl ratio of 0.99. So we are way beyond industry standard in this department here. Am I right on these numbers?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I like figure XP. I used to use it for the average of the axes, but now I'm using 8 of these graphs, one for each axis, and holy cow, is it hard to get these numbers good with 8 axes at the same time. It's a killer. You're killing me, Lonnie. All right.
I did warn him, however, so.
Next
Makes it 8
slide.
times harder to figure a mirror.
Yeah, when I started using this test that he's got going, the good news is it's a better test. The bad news is it's a better test. Well, on this slide, we have a slow mirror and a fast mirror. So a lot of you guys know I make large aperture fast focal ratio mirrors. And they are kind of a specialty because if you look at how fat the Miller-Croy graph is on a slow mirror, the top one, that's easy to do. If you look at how skinny the tornado is on that lower mirror, the faster mirror, that's hard to do. Now, if you think about Mike's mirror, 32-inch f2.8, it was twice as hard as that skinny one down there. So a lot of people make small, slow mirrors because of that graph right there. Moving to the one down below is tormenting for most people. Both of those are still diffraction limited graphs, but one's a fast mirror. Okay, go ahead.
Like I mentioned before, this type of graph here is showing the actual focal point of each one of the zones on the mirror. So it's the focal height. If you've got a high spot on it, you know that it's focusing long. It doesn't mean you grind it down. It means you change the slope. So it'll come and bring the focus down more.
Okay, next.
It comes kind of second nature after you've done it for a while. Understand it.
This is your
And
graph.
here it is.
That one there.
When I'm thinking about a mirror, I like to use my hands. You know, the outer edge of the mirror like this, and I'll tilt my hand and see which way the light's going. So if it looks like the Croy is long, I'll say, well, then it's open. We got to close it. So you seep it a little bit, make the curve to bring the focal point down. That's after, like I said, after a while, it's as easy to do as if you have the actual surface profile. You can tell just about where you need to move the glass and change the slope.
Eric, if I point at this, will people be able to at home be able to see what I'm pointing at?
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, I'm about to tell something to the people in the room here.
Also be careful of what you get because the projector will cut off. It'll turn off. If you block,
Oh,
if you
really?
block.
Okay, I'm just gonna stand here. I'm gonna go ahead and use that pointer if you don't mind. Sorry for the people at home here, but I do want to show something, and this is the only way I can do an error. Thank you. All right, so I want to talk about transverse error. There's wavefront error, there's longitudinal error, and there's transverse error. So the wavefront error is when the wave coming down isn't spherical in shape, which leads to longitudinal errors and transverse error. So the longitudinal error is when it's supposed to cross right there, but you see how it's crossing there instead. So that's your longitudinal error. Your transverse error is to see how it's supposed to go there, but it's actually there. That's your transverse error. Your wavefront error affects your longitudinal error, and longitudinal error affects the transverse error. And it's a transverse error that ruins everything in your telescope. It all boils down to a transverse error. That means that instead of the light going into the dot of the star, it's off to the side a little bit, polluting your stellar dot. So whatever errors there are, it all boils down to a transverse error that ruins your vision. Sorry for the people home that I was not able to show them what I was just showing them there. Oh, okay, click. That's your machine right there. Oh, okay.
No, this is the first machine I made out of stealthing plans years ago. The first mirror that I made was a 16-inch. Everybody said, don't make a 16-inch, it's too big. Well, I put in a lot of work on that 16. I didn't want to put it all into a 6-inch, you know. So anyway, it was very inexpensive. It worked quite well. It is a knife edge Foucault test. And the but is there's an awful lot of problems with Foucault testing. So go to the next slide and we'll get through it here. The challenge are judgment errors, because obviously you're looking at it and you're judging where that shadow is falling. The little Everest pins are actually zonal markers, same thing, only I like them better because they show you the entire mirror open and you're able to pinpoint right exactly on the shadow where you are. But it's really hard to judge that position, especially in the center and especially at the outer edge, because it's so narrow. The zones get narrower as you go out. You have test and creep, which what you're doing is you're testing each one of the zones one at a time. So we'll start like at the mid zone or start at the edge and work your way in. And then by the time you get to the back, can come back to the outer edge, it'll be different. And the reason it's different is because something has changed, probably with the temperatures in your room, or depending on where you're, if you do it like in the morning when the sun is coming up and starting to get warm in your shop. And notice I said shop, not garage. We got to get that straight. And then this error becomes greater. Everything that you touch, if you touch the tester, it moves just a hair. So it's really hard to get it to come back in the same place and get a repetition. So what it required was a whole bunch of repetitive numbers. I used to do about 4 or 5 sets at the final figuring and average them together to get what I thought was accurate. And I wasn't even sure then, because you tend to kind of want to put in the right number when you're looking at it. You look at the dial and you're turning the indicator. Well, that's supposed to be, 0.734. Well, I'll go over there and see what it looks like. That's what you're doing. So you kind of mush it the way you want it to be. It takes a long time. It takes 2 or 3 hours to complete those final test cycles. And that's after you allow the mirror to cool down for an hour and a half or 2. So
Do you have a coder mask picture by chance on here?
a what?
A coder mask picture?
I don't.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna expand on this a little bit because I use coder mask when I do Foucault tests. So instead of little needles here, it's got holes here that you look. And so you know that you're in the right position when this hole and this hole are both uniformly gray at the same place. Then you go to the next holes, then the next holes. So that works great with slow, small mirrors. But my problem is I do fast, large mirrors. And so trying to get the zone 3 on the right and zone 3 on the left to go great at the same time is impossible, because the terminator of that shadow will start across in one, go slowly, then the one on the other side will race across really fast when the one on the right side still is going across. And so then you have to determine which point do the terminators of that shadow go down the middle of the zone at the same time, and the subjectivity of saying, where's the terminator? Because it's a gradient. So you can't say, well, that's the terminator. So that's why Foucault tests don't work for large, fast mirrors. So I used to do this thing called the caustic test. Well, the caustic test would take me 3 hours, and I have to jig it up here, measure it, jig it up here, measure it, jig it up here, measure it, jig it up here, measure it. Then I come back and measure the first one. The numbers would be totally different, because in the period of time it took me to measure my telescope, the room temperature changed, the concrete floor expanded or contracted, and over 25 feet of test, it can contract 10 or 15 thousandths of an inch, which completely destroys your test.
Which is all it takes. Yeah.
And so you can't do it unless you're in some isolated tunnel 2 miles down in the earth, which is why I now use Lonnie and Bill's test, because even though the caustic test is a killer test, you can't perform it without the room changing shape on you, which destroys the test.
How many people have done Foucault testing? You have, Mike? Yeah, you haven't lived till you try that. It's
Click.
Rocky testing. We talked about it a little bit before. These are the shapes you come up with, spheres on the left, and you're going to come up with exactly the opposite inside or outside the focus, because the Ronchi screen wants to, the further away from the focal point, I should say, gets closer to the screen, starts to distort the figures. So if you're on a parabola and your focal points are different across the mirror, then it starts to bend the lines outward and gives you the general shape and general idea. If you have any errors, like on the left two on the right, if you have a hole in the center, it'll show up like that on the Ronchi screen. It'll bend it. If you have a scratch in your surface, or if you have a high or low spot, it'll actually bend the lines, and you can tell how smooth the mirror is with the focal. Very good for testing turn down edge. You can see the next to the last screen has little hooks on it. If you're inside of focus, the hooks are like little shoes. They come inside. If you're outside, they hook out. And so it's a good way to check what your progress, but it doesn't give you what a quantity data doesn't give you any actual numbers about where your surface is. You have to compare it with what it should be.
To fix, oh,
When you're looking at radius of curvature, when you're talking about the radius of curvature for a parabola, what are you referring to?
Well, oh,
okay, so you start with a sphere. Now, when you change your sphere to a parabola, okay, yeah,
You're being blocked by that.
if you imagine a sphere like this, we're only looking at this much of it. So this sphere here and this paraboloid here, we're looking at such a small sample that the paraboloid and sphere are almost identical over the little area that we're looking at. So we start out, if you look at the top left image, that's outside the radius of curvature of a sphere. And by the time you parabolize the mirror, it looks like the guy right next to it, because we're only looking at a little bit of that paraboloid. So yes, for the area that we're looking at, they have virtually the same radius of curvature. Now, if you go out to another part of the paraboloid, the radius of curvature is humongous, but that's way off the optic.
don't forget that first or the previous slide that the sphere focuses everything to the same point. And that's the radius of curvature for the sphere. And what we're trying to do is create the errors in the parabola what they would be at the radius of curvature. And this shows up the errors that we're creating with the parabola. If you put the parabola on a star, it'll show up straight lines like a sphere.
Yeah, if you look at the left top guy, that's a sphere. They are straight, evenly spaced, and parallel. If you got anything else, you got a problem. So then when you parabolize it, you look like the guy right next to it. But if you take that exact same parabolized mirror and put it on a star with a Ronchi grating, it'll look like the guy on the left, because you're now null paraboloid at an infinite focus.
Everything is focusing the same place on infinity. Yeah.
Only there will be a black shadow in the center because you have a secondary mirror in the way. That's the one thing to think about when you look at this on a Newtonian telescope at a star. There is a black blocked secondary mirror shadow. This is what it looked like if you were looking at a star with a Ronchi grating through a refractor. You would have straight, evenly spaced parallel bars with no central obstruction.
This would be a great test if you were star testing, because it would be straight lines. It'd be really easy to figure, well, the line's not straight, I move it this way, or figure it that way and straighten them out. But when they're curved, you don't exactly know how far they have to be curved. So it's very difficult.
Okay, click.
Here's an example of how the lines change according to the focal point. So if you have a hole in the center, for instance, the hole will, like I was showing with my hands, it'll pull the focal point down, pulls it away from the parabola, and therefore it changes the shape of where that hole is on the Ronchi screen.
And the more lines per inch you're Ronchi grating, the more accurate this test is. And the more outstanding your turn down edge will start to look. Every mirror will fail a turn down edge test if you just put enough lines per inch Ronchi grating on it. Okay, click. I used to wire test. Matter of fact, Dan Balkin's 41, we wire tested. That was a great test. I think they did the Mayall telescope at Kip Peak with a wire test. And all it is a Foucault test, only instead of a wire, instead of a razor, it's a wire. So we put a wire in there and then intercept and look at it. The light goes through a pinhole, hits mirror, comes back, crosses the wire, and then you look at it. When that wire's at the razor curvature, it blocks the light. So you get two images. One is the wire going down the middle, and the other is a circle where the radius curvature is being blocked by the wire. And so you get that phi looking thing. So if you look at zone 7 out there, that wire is at the radius of curvature for the zone 7. So you would write that micrometer number down on there, move it. Yeah, move to the next one, write them down. So instead of having 4 zone focal test, you can have, when I was doing, say, a 22 inch, I'd have a radius of 10.5 inches, and one at 10 inches, one at 9.5 inches, one at 9 inches. You can have many, many, many zones to fill in that tornado graph. But when you get to the center, it craps out on you because the whole thing is almost the same. So you can only get down to maybe the 30% zone, and all of a sudden the thing just kind of pukes out on you. So it's a great test from the edge to about the 30% zone.
Yeah, Jeff, when you're doing that, you're testing more than just one direction.
Correct. If you see it, you're doing.
You do,
And
you bet.
it's
There's a guy named John Sherman that has a spot test. And he uses a little spot on a screen. Instead of the wire, he's using a spot that will null the mirror. And he uses the same idea to get circular lines, shows up
That would be.
astigmatism or funny and the whole thing. Yeah.
Exactly. It is sanity check, but there's a couple of things that go wrong with wire test. It's the same with any shop test. Your mirror is standing with the optical axis horizontal, and gravity is causing the top to sag, and you don't get a perfect circle. It's like that with any shop test. If your mirror stand is able to release all of those forces, if you've got a really well-built mirror stand, you theoretically can solve that. But you could see it on a wire test.
The fun part about this test is that it's done with a Ronchi screen. So what we've done is we've gone to the radius of curvature, and you get the Ronchi screen right down to one line. All the rest of the lines have expanded out. So you can take that one line and move it just like a wire test, and that's what we get. And the reason I use this is for a sanity check. Because when I'm figuring a mirror and we're using another test like our camera test, then you can take the mirror, and if it's been said that if you would just test the zone, outer zone 7, whichever zone it is, and test the center and get the distance, you know how close you are to a parabola in a general sense. It's not, you're not testing the surface, but you're testing the overall figure on it. So I use it for a sanity check to make sure all my numbers are good. And
His left image here shows those extra lines because he uses a Ronchi grading to do this. I use my wife's hair. My wife has 4 thousandths of an inch thick hair. It's huge. Most human hair is about 2.5 thousandths. I used to collect hair for these, and Fred Shoemaker's daughter has 1,000th hair, thinnest hair I've ever seen. My wife has 4 thousandths, the thickest I've ever seen. That's what I use. So I don't get those extra bars because I have one single hair. And but the fact is, what I do is I take a felt marker and literally mark on my glass at many radials, the different radius, and then I move the tester until the circle was right on my mark, and I'd write it down. But then I check to see if it was on my other marks. Then I move to the next marker, write down, next mark it down. And it's a pretty good test. Again, the fact it takes an hour to do
with all
ruins
the
it.
variations.
It ruins it because the size of the concrete floor at the beginning of the test and the size of the concrete floor at the end of the test ain't the same.
You can see, you can put a mask on the front of that and it'd be the same as a Foucault test. You would move the zones to that mask point for a zone. And then you take a reading of how far back your stage is. And that's how you set it up.
If you look at this room around the concrete floor, if I put a device there and there, measured their distance to 1,000th of an inch somehow, then came back 2 hours later and did it again, they would be different.
Yeah.
It sucks. So that's why the tests that we're talking about now aren't so good. We're going to get to one that's much better. Okay, click.
Mask making. I don't know how much time you guys, we got till.
We got 3.5 more hours.
We've got mask making has been fun. What we're doing is the two things that are critical on it are the distance, the location of the hole, and the location of the camera. We take a picture of it. So these holes have to be really precise. And I developed this little jig. You probably can't see it from the camera, but we put the mask inside of this. We have a digital readout scale along the side, so we can get it very precise down to about plus or minus 5 thousandths when we plunge a hole we'll move it and we'll get the exact hole locations all the way across.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second, Lonnie. I'm sorry. We've just moved from full cult testing, caustic testing, wire testing into digital camera testing here. In case you didn't catch it.
Just with local as well, so.
Good, but I just wanted to mention that we've moved on to a better test.
I'll put this in there. somewhere. Pretty much.
I apologize
let's see
for
what else
interrupting. I
I
thought
missed.
you had more.
Oh, the one interesting thing that I did, this was originally designed with Bill Thomas for his sit test. But with the plunge router, I have a lot of problem with the accuracy of the thing because it wobbles as it goes down. We were getting plus or minus like 15, 20, 30,000 hole locations, depending on how you push on it. So I made a cutter that has a bearing on it. And then I put the bearing in the bottom of the router base. You can see it in there. So the router cutter actually fits perfectly into that little bronze bearing. And we get a dead on accurate hole. So I'm really, really happy with that. And this is the digital readout right here. I've got a little micronic adjuster, so you can, it's pretty hard to get it right onto a thousandths where you want it. But when you do, you lock it down and punch a hole. Takes me a while. Just keep me busy making these things. So
I got about 20 masks I need to make like as soon as possible.
as soon as possible, yeah.
So we're about to talk about photographic tests. And so these masks, would you say the holes are accurate to 2/1000ths of an inch?
Probably. I call them plus or minus 5. But they're
Okay,
right in
they're
there.
accurate to about 2 or 3/1000ths of an inch. The cameras, I have 5,905 pixels per inch, and the software that we're using will measure the return spots to 1,000th of a pixel. So the image on the camera is accurate to about a 6/1,000,000th of an inch. So we've got linear equations going from holes that are accurate to 2/1000ths to return spots that are accurate to about a 6/1,000,000th. And so the linear equations we're making are really hot accurate. So the idea that's coming along here is we'll take an image, a 4-second image that is way more accurate than all the other tests we have. And in 4 seconds, the shop did not change length. So the precision has just skyrocketed on these tests. Are we ready for the next slide? This is Bill Thomas's slit image test, which was what we were all using, 3-4 years ago?
Mhm.
And this was the first high precision photographic test. We would take one cross section, one axis, 15 holes. We would image this, and we used a razor slit system. We use pinholes now, but we used a razor slit system. And that would be the image that we'd get on a raw format. And we would change it over to a TIFF format so we can do metrology on it. So we used a program called ImageJ, which is used by electron microscopes for measuring things. And we would measure those slits to 1,000th of a pixel, getting the locations of where the zones on the mirrors were heading, and then put that into a Mill-LaCroix graph, and then put that into Figure XP profile graph. And that's the basis of Bill Thomas's slit image test. And when I was doing caustic tests, I thought I was the man. I thought I got this stuff down. And Bill and Lonnie came, hey, you got to try this test. I go, nah, I know what I'm doing. I'm good. What an idiot. A couple years later,
No, not an idiot. It's
an idiot.
the caustic has exactly the same problem as Foucault does. Everything's changing. You're trying to do one hole at a time.
My ego got in the way. Couple years later,
Extremely accurate, though.
a couple years later, he says, you know what? You really ought to try this, Baldwin. So I the second I saw the light, and I had not returned. I
No
mean,
pun intended.
yeah, I've moved on to Hartman testing now, but instantaneous realization that my ego got in the way completely. And I swore I'm not going to let my ego ever get in the way of advancing my mirror making skills ever again. Anything you want to say about SIP before we move on here?
Nope, I think it's got it.
All right, let's click this. I like how he said that sit mirror DNA photo. What's really cool is when we were investigating this, I had a 12.5 inch mirror and I did a sit test on it. And then I gave Lonnie the same 12.5 inch mirror and he did a sit test on it and we were different by an 84th of a wave. So I mean, that
Two
is
different locations. Yeah.
two different testers,
different
mass,
setups, everything,
locations, everything. We were off from each other by an 84th of a wave. So it literally is a DNA test for these mirrors.
I have it drawn in here. It measures the distance between the slits. But actually what we're doing is the image J measures from the upper left-hand corner and it will start the pixel count this direction. So we just get a distance for each one of them, but extrapolate the distance between them.
What's really cool is I will circle a zone and I'll measure its XY position and they're to the thousandth of a pixel. I'll come back and I'll do it again with a different shape. Same exact number. I'll come back and do a different shape, same exact number. It doesn't matter how I do it. We are measuring those slits to the thousandth of a pixel and it is repeatable like nothing ever seen before. It is amazing to watch. Okay, let's click the next slide. Lonnie here is the creator of the Easy Hartman test. It has revolutionized my mirror making. I have everything. I have you to thank for everything. Give it to him.
I've also made it that much harder to make a mirror. The Easy Hartman is something that's been around since the turn of the century. The Hartman, I'm sorry. And, it's nothing is original about it. I just wrote a worksheet that figures all this data we're talking about. The original Hartman is used on big observatory mirrors. They put it on a star and they'll put the mask on the front of the telescope and get their data that way with the same idea. But this Hartman is figured just with the equilateral triangles and or not equilateral, but equal triangles. And yeah. And what we're doing is we're taking a camera photo, just like we do with a sit test, which, by the way, all this has been done before. They originally did the Hale mirror. They've done 3 or 4 others with extremely similar type tests. So it's nothing new. But this here will take one photograph of the whole mirror, and it not only takes the most of the focal tests, you're only doing 1/2 of the mirror, one radius. And this one here has 8 different radiuses. So it really gets the data. And it does it all at once, one photograph. So there's no errors and so forth. And it also checks, one of the biggest surprises about it was it checks for astigmatism. Astigmatism is hard to find. If you look at it, you can tell by going in and out of focus because the definition of astigmatism is a different focal point for different parts of the mirror. So if you go in and out of focus on an astigmatic mirror, it'll do some shifting on it. And if you're looking at like a star test or like a ball bearing reflection, it will flare at different positions as you go through the focal point. But what it is different focal points. So what we've done is I took the outer zones and I will compare this focal point and this focal point, the distance from the center. And obviously the distance is relative to where it focuses. So now we have a whole set of readings on all the zones, on all the radiuses across the mirror, and to compare them with the rest of the radiuses as well. And you can tell if there's any low or high areas any place, and that's astigmatism. So it pops it right out. We can see it right away.
Do you also rotate the mask or you just leave it in one static position?
I leave it in one place. It's pretty hard because there are differences across the mirror surface. And if you start moving around, you're correcting things that you didn't know were there. Obviously, you see the distance between the radius too gets wider, but the tools we're using are bigger. So we're still correcting overlapping. And theoretically, it'll be pretty consistent between the two. When we used a Foucault test, we would take that mask and move the mirror and take 2 or 3 different locations trying to figure it out. But obviously, when you're changing the setup and you're changing the mask location, you don't get the whole picture of what's going on.
These radials are 45 degrees apart. And yes, you can rotate the mask 22.5 degrees so you can get in between the radials. Doesn't do anything, doesn't give any more information. I did want to comment, you said it's the same test. I'm going to say it's not. If you look at the Hale telescope, they took a 14-inch by 14-inch glass plate, pulled it back, imaged those spots, processed the photograph, and then took rulers and measured the dots. That would take weeks to do this. Lonnie's taking a photograph and it's 4 seconds, and we're accurate to a 6 millionth of an inch on one end and a 2 thousandths of an inch on the other end. And that alone makes this way better than anything they ever pulled on the Hale telescope with these photographic plates.
Yep. But I want to emphasize that it's not an original test. About 1940, I forget now, 43, a man wrote an article in a Telescope magazine and described this entire test. So I took that as a baseline as well.
I want to talk about is astigmatism. When he first showed this to me, I thought, just because you're getting the right numbers on the millicroid doesn't mean you're free of astigmatism. It says, well, that's not how we're checking it. Here's how we're checking it. On the photograph, he's got this location and this location. Then he's got this location and this location, and that one and that one, and that one, that one. He measures how far apart those guys are. And he looks for the biggest one and the smallest one, and he counts pixels. So like, there might be a 3 pixel difference here and a 2 pixel difference there and a 1 pixel difference there. And so he can measure the astigmatism by actually determining how far apart these guys are compared to those guys. And that is a good astigmatism check.
It also tells you where it is on the mirror.
Does it zone 7, zone 6, zone 5, zone 4? And so he's come up with the rule of thumb. I want everything to be less than 6 pixels. Well, I did some arithmetic, and 6 pixels is more than enough
Should be. Yeah.
to be free of astigmatism, visible astigmatism. So it is an excellent astigmatism checker,
It really is. Yep.
better than any other astigmatism checker out there. All right, next.
Here's a chart it comes up with. We've got one over here on this mirror. But the astigmatism check is right on the top. You can see the zones, 2.8 pixels, 2.1. That's really pretty darn good. There isn't very much. We don't have a baseline yet on how maximum we can go, but I did a mirror with 20 and it was visually astomatic. So I originally had the judgment that maybe 10 pixels was about right. But now we've come to believe it's down to about 5. So it's
Well, if you're
pretty darn
6 pixels, then on my camera, that's 6,000 pixels per inch. 6 pixels is a thousandth of an inch. So 3 inches away from focus, you're only a thousandth of an inch different. So
Yeah.
that is very free of astigmatism.
Yeah.
So I think your 6 pixels is a good line.
Yep.
Is more than enough.
And again, these are Millie's or Crow graphs. So we're not looking at surface profile. We're looking at the focal points of all the zones.
Yeah, the slopes.
So if you have, for instance, this zone right here, this is focusing long. So if you want to bring it down and have it focus shorter, you're going to have to tilt the glass a little bit and increase the slope to pull that focal point down. I think that's it.
Yeah, that spreadsheet, that one page of the spreadsheet tells the whole story right there.
Yep.
It shows that there is no spherical aberration. It shows there's no astigmatism. And that right there is a really good mirror. So if you put that on figure XP, that's probably, Struhl ratio of 0.996 or
Yeah,
something.
9899.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, click. There we go. Those are the profiles of the 8 radials. Is that the same mirror?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to sneak over here and read his number. I know this is his, but I'm going to read his numbers here. Peak to Valley, 10 nanometers. Peak to Valley, 25 nanometers. That's a 20th of a wave. Right here, Peak to Valley, 45 nanometers, but that's okay. That's 1 radial. So you can literally look at those guys and say this mirror is extremely under control, radial by radial. If it were, perfect, it would be within 20 nanometers on all 8 radials, which might be possible to do. Somebody, I don't know. Then he's got this average axis. So if you take them all and average out, his mirror is 20 nanometer peak to valley on the surface. He's got a Struhl ratio of 99, which is, that's the bomb. Yeah, Mike.
I think a lot of us probably don't know the exact definition of Struhl ratio.
Okay, Struhl ratio is the fact that if you had perfect optics, theoretically perfect optics, then only 84% of the light will fall in the airy disk. The other 16% falls in diffraction rings because of the wave nature of the light and the circular shape of the entrance pupil. It is not possible to have more than 84% of the light falling into the area disk. That would be a perfect optic. So the Struhl ratio is how much percentage is falling in divided by how much percentage would be perfect. So if you had 80% of the light in the area disk, then your Struhl ratio would be 80/84. And so when you hit 80%, you have diffraction limited optics. 80% Struhl ratio is a quarter wave optic with 14th wave RMS. It leads to an 80%. Once you hit 94%, you cannot see any improvement on the optics. So that's why I set for my personal goal 10th wave optics, which gives you a 26th wave RMS, which gives you a 94% Struhl ratio. To me, any improvement is not noticeable. The mirrors come out better than that, but those are the limiting lines right there. 10th wave peak to valley on the wavefront, 26th wave on the RMS, and a 94% Struhl ratio. What was your Struhl ratio, James? It should be 985. So they're coming out way better than 94%.
Even though diffraction limited is about, you said 80, I forgot, 80, 84.
80% Struhl ratio.
Yeah. At that point, on a average night with the atmosphere kind of shaky and so forth, that's probably the best your mirror can do, is about diffraction limited. But on those perfect nights when everything is still, that's when this high Struhl ratio will come into effect. It'll give you that perfect image that you're looking for.
Well, if your mirror is 80% and the night's 80%, then you're down to 64%.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want as good as you can get.
And I also feel that it gives you a little more room for the atmosphere to be turbulent before it pulls the focal points away from the center of the area disk. So if you got them all closer to the center of the area disk, it takes more to move them out.
And then on top of that, we usually put them in telescope beds. Or heat tube current, whatever, a lousy secondary. I'm developing an at the focus Hartman test, and this is one image from it. So the way mine's going to work is the mask goes in front of the telescope. The light goes through the holes onto the mirror, comes back, reflects into the secondary mirror and out the focuser, and then you take a picture of it at the focuser. So this uses the primary mirror, secondary mirror, the telescope, the whole kahuna. And so it's not just a primary mirror test, it's a whole system test. And so what happens is, as I move these I have all these linear equations plotted, then I move a plane with my Excel spreadsheet in and out of the focus. And those dots need to pass through a tiny little circle to be diffraction limited. So after I Hartman test using the easy Hartman test, the plan is to go to the at the focus Hartman test and then tweak the telescope mirror until all of those linear equations do in fact pass through my little pre-designated circle. That's going to be very hard to do because you're using a secondary mirror, you're using a cell, you're outside, you've got tube currents, you've got every imaginable problem all working against you, and you're trying to get all those dots to go through a little circle. So this is, I think, a true Hartman test because it's actually in the telescope, and will actually show whether it is or is not happening. More on that later. Click. Well, star testing is universally considered the ultimate test of optics. I still think the at the focus Hartman test will be better than that. But if you look at the top guy, inside and outside of focus, they are supposed to look exactly the same because the wave is supposed to be a spherical wave whose center of curvature is the focus. So coming in, passing through the focus and going out should be identical on both sides. If you got a bump on it, then it's not going to be the same inside and outside. So if you look at undercorrected or overcorrected zones, you can see it. If you see a turn on edge, you can see it. If you have astigmatism, if you have tube currents, you can see it. If you have a rough mirror, you can see it. If you have collimation problems, you can see it. you can see everything with the STAR test. It is the test. Every telescope mirror passes the STAR test if you use a low enough power eyepiece. But the trick is to keep jacking the power up until the telescope fails the STAR test. At that point, you can start to see the errors. When I do a STAR test, I like to use maybe a 3 millimeter eyepiece, if not smaller.
It's really fun to think about the undercorrected zones, the second set of star tests. Think of that as the mirror zones. Each one of those rings is a circular part of the mirror surface. And most people argue with me about that. No, that's just the diffraction pattern. Well, there actually are the places where that part of the mirror is focusing. So if you're outside of focus and you come up with a bright ring, that means the rays are coming too far out, doesn't it? They're actually eliminating, if you move the eyepiece back from focus, then if it's focusing bright there and dark on the inside, that means you're focusing too long at that spot. And,
You're both right. It is just diffraction rings, but it will be darker
Yes,
in and lighter out if you have a spherical aberration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're both right.
And John Dobson used to say, he used like a Christmas ornament on the top of a light pole. That's how he said he'd test his mirrors. He said if it's bright on the outside, it needs a little more polishing. That's the way he figured his mirror. Increase the slope. That's what he was doing to bring it down.
Not that we're going to use John Dobson as the end all say of how to figure mirrors.
Correct.
Yeah. Get it? Correct. It should be under correct.
Notice how the astigmatism changes shape in and out of focus. It shifts position. Same thing happened with a knife edge. If you put the knife edge on the mirror and you go in and out, it will tilt one way or the other. And the Ronchi screen will do the same thing. If you move it inside or outside, astigmatism shows as a slope.
Is a little bit after 9. Let's click. Okay, speaking of Struhl ratio and stuff, there is a table. If you look at the bottom, peak to valley wave, one wave, if your Struhl ratio is 10%, that's bad. We come up, that's bad optic. Poor optic, half wave, 40% Struhl. Finally get to diffraction limited Rayleigh criteria, quarter wave, 80% Struhl. If you go up to very good optics, eighth wave, 95% Struhl. I've done the arithmetic on this. A 10th wave is 94% Struhl. So there's a little differential here. Once we go beyond that, the observer is not going to be able to tell a difference in the performance, but we could still say the optics are better. But my understanding is you can't actually see it. The top one is impossible, by the way. A 0 wave error and a perfect Struhl ratio of 1. 84% of the lights inside the airy disk. Theoretically, that's not possible.
That's kind of like a hole in one in golf, though. You know, you're actually aiming at the hole if you hit hole in one.
Yeah.
It's pretty much impossible.
Except that hole is 16 miles away,
That's right.
uphill, and it's windy. Okay, next. Okay, so these are my standards. Mirror blank needs to be round, evenly thick, stress release blank. The edge should be smooth and flat back and polished clear. The optical surface has no pitting. It's smooth on the knife edge examination. The quality is 10th wave, and that's by Easy Hartman and Figure XP. RMS is a 26 wave, Struhl ratio is 94%. There's controlled astigmatism. I'm not going to say there's no astigmatism because there's some astigmatism everywhere. Controlled turn down edge, controlled scratches, and the null Hartman has all linear equations passing through a pre-designated circle. That's going to be my criteria when I'm all done with the mirror. Okay, next. This is me, Bill, and Lonnie.
That's it.
And I think that's our last slide, isn't it?
It is. Let me talk just really quickly about what Jeff and I have been working on. The hold the mask on.
May want to rotate around so the camera can see what it is we've got on.
Mirror cooling has been an issue.
That's the camera reason.
Yeah.
You can take your finger and put it on here, it'll show up on the test because it'll expand the glass just enough to change the surface.
You have a drink right there, maybe. Just FYI.
Yeah, okay.
Don't drop your phone.
I'm just gonna go just enough so you can see this in there.
Okay.
I kind of don't want to go much further about that.
And it's dependent on when we took our test. It was in the morning or in the afternoon when the things got warm. The problem with glass is that it absorbs the heat and it kind of holds it mostly the temperature differential in the center. So if it's hot mirror, when it cools down, it'll cool down outside and leave the center hot. And so what we need is not the correct temperature, but the same temperature. And right away, I thought, well, you know, we've had all kinds of problems. One test would be this way, and then we take another one, it'd be off. And this test method is so accurate that it picks up all these little changes. So driving us nuts because it was going all over the place. So what I decided was, well, I didn't have a fan and there was no air getting to the back. So I thought, well, I'll put a fan in. So the first test I did with a fan blowing on the back. And it was really fun because we could take a test of it and it would show right where the fan was because it's concentrating the air right on the center and it would change the center. So I thought, well, okay, let's turn it around. So I sucked the air out and it smoothed it right out, but we still had some issues. So what we ended up doing was putting this shroud over the top of it like this. And I won't put it on there, I can show you that. But, and then I put a fan on the front of the mirror as well. So here we have this thing isolated. And we hook this thing on the front. Like that. You get to go on. Now we've got air going to the front and it going around out the back and it's in a shroud. So what I worried about though was I didn't want to create a synthetic environment that makes the mirror wrong, basically. But what I did was I changed the voltage of these little 12 volts to 6. So they just barely make a little breeze. And in about an hour to an hour and a half, we got consistent testing, regardless of what was going on in the room. So that was really, and Jeff has just been going through it, the same exact thing in his garage.
It's been a nightmare. Yeah, this seems so stupid, but it's such a nightmare. I have a big piece of sonotube, a cover on the front with a fan and a fan in the back. And I compare it to the cowling on your airplane engine. The air has to go through the engine, through the cooling fins and out. It has to be routed right. It's exactly the same thing. And if you have any routing problems, your mirror becomes different temperature here as to here, therefore it's swelled up here, it shrunk there, and your test is totally different. This Hartman test is that accurate. I mean, it took me a month to resolve this problem, I think. And I was going nowhere. I just stopped working the mirror and said, I'm only going to work on the stability of the mirror. Took a month.
So to solve that problem, making it a false mirror, I took an early morning test when the air was pretty stable. It's been stable for most of the night. And then I took a photograph and used that for a benchmark. And this pretty much duplicates it pretty close. There's always a little variation here and there, but that really made quite a bit of difference. You'll notice. Go ahead.
What brings us to the telescope. Take these perfect mirrors, put them in the telescope. And we take them out of a 70-degree room, take it to a 48-degree environment. We put a fan on the back, but we got a shroud on the scope with a fan on the back and it trickles out. How long is it before that mirror has stabilized into the same shape that we made it in the shop? Never. So why do we even go through all this crap? I don't know.
You notice we have little balls on here too, with little points. We're worried about any stress with the glass when it goes back. If the glass is changing shape because of temperature, this is minute, of course, then it can't move if it has fixed points. So spreading the points out exactly at these angles also prevents a lot of the potato chipping, which is the bending of the mirror from its weight. And it kind of like holding a piece of paper in a funnel, it supports itself, which is something interesting about, you were talking about the meniscus blanks. Meniscus mirrors, in my mind, have some of that self-support because of their shape. Yeah, so exactly.
You guys can't see it out there, but the guys in TV land can see this line on the side of the mirror here. That's the center of gravity. It's not down the middle. The center of gravity is back a little bit because it's flat on the back and curved on the front. So we calculate the center of gravity. These balls are on that line. Well, this is a different mirror stand situation. On mine, those balls right on that line. So that's not front heavy and it's not back heavy.
So we've changed.
Potato chipping.
We've arrived at pretty good repeatability. So it's kind of cool. All right, that's our presentation here. Yes, questions, please. we've got to convert all of you to making mirrors now. I mean, not a chance in hell.
Well.
Well, you know, the formula is if,
Is out there in Zoom land or in the chair?
Yeah, there was one equation in all of this, simply an equation related to triangles. In the Hartman test. But it had said D1 on one side of the equation, and it was also on the other side. Until that this is just the ratio of the total distance to the total height.
Right.
And it goes, what's the point of that equation on there? It was on the ETS slides, the equation is always listed.
If you, I don't know how Lonnie's picture is.
Right there, little, ellipse on D1 is. So D1 and D2 is the total distance, A1 and A2 is the total height. So. That's just saying that you can move the A1 underneath the D1 on the other side, and it's just saying that the height, the distance over a partial height is the same as the total distance over the total height. I just.
exactly, yeah. I'm trying to think the easiest way to explain it. Jeff is the math guy, so. I figured I'd get that. A1 and A2 are fixed. We know what they are because we took the measurements.
Right.
And what we're looking for is D1, which is the focal point of that zone. And so
And
if,
he knows D2 because we measured how far back the camera goes.
so if A2 changes because of the measurements, it will change the position of D1. And it gives us the exact focal point of where that zone is stopped.
D1 is what you're trying to find. How do you find it if it's on both sides of the equation?
Well, there's a D1 and D2.
Hang on, Lonnie.
Is that what you mean?
On this, you got a D1 on that side and a D1 on that side.
Oh, that's the formula that I got out of the how to make a telescope book.
Okay, Jerry, you're
And-
right. You're correct.
Yeah,
I got it with a different way. It is a solvable number. And it is accurately put into our spreadsheet. I don't.
and I actually had Jeff break down the formula to make sure it was right. So, Yeah.
It does not represent weight.
yeah,
No, there can't be D1 on that. You're right.
yeah.
Sure.
I noticed that too. I did, yeah.
Triangle to compute D1, which gives you a longitudinal error, which then allows us to compute that there is.
And all I did was convert it to Foucault numbers, you know, with a reference of Foucault. And that worked out, yeah. I was just gonna say that the formula for not making a mirror is don't ever look through a big telescope. You do, you just gotta have one.
Comment, you know, this is all a work in progress. When Jeff and I started talking about thinking large telescope and 32 picture. We were gonna test that. I think that's was just a start test. And so we were gonna use the Foucault test, maybe the wire test, a few other things, but none of this stuff was really in existence until Bill Thomas came up with the SID test. And so I've been watching this evolution. You know, when my scope was finally finished, we used the SID test, and we were using it in one direction. So I know I have an excellent mirror in one direction. So, go ahead.
Yeah, the way we got around that, Mike, is we tested it on the primary axis. And then B, we examined it for signals.
Yeah.
And we called it a day. Now, we put your mirror on a easy Hartman test, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. That's it.
Well, maybe not. I
Well,
mean,
anyway,
yeah.
that's not the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is just, it's incredible, the advances you guys have made in just the last 5 years or so. I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
The mirror, and not only that, but both of you, you're generating, starting from, you know, walking around a barrel or sandblasting, and all of a sudden going to a diamond generator, what a long tangent are.
Yeah, John Schick was with me in the 90s when we were sandblasting current generation. Were we?
I mean, you know, the advancement in the last 5 to 8 years, it blows me away, and we've all kind of been involved in it. Certainly with mirror testing at this level, I'm not in it. But I'm very appreciate what you guys are doing.
The SID test was a ginormous leap up, but I gotta tell you, the Hartman test wasn't ginormously, but because it's like a interferometer, you're looking at the surface rather than the line, you're looking at the
You
surface.
tried the interferometry and boy, that was. a
You
really
know,
good-
that interferometer is fast.
Yeah.
The physical would be good, but it's a lot of work. This test, 4 seconds, you got your image, let's go.
And I really, all that time I was thinking, there's gotta be a better way to do this. I'm not smart enough to figure out how it is. I know there has to be a better way. And sure enough, we're there. But it just came to evolution.
Lonnie and Bill and I are gonna give talks at the Altas Initiative in Oregon in October, and I'm hoping. Those engineers are gonna see the light and wake up and say, let's do this. I'm hoping. Tim, you got a question?
Yeah, I want to put this whole thing in context for where I'm at, Jeff, Lonnie. Great presentation.
Oh, thank
It
you.
was over my head after the first slide, but it's stuck with you. Right, yeah, but I can only imagine the effort, the experience, all that you put into this and the cost. I'm not even gonna ask what these mirrors cost, but I know what a mirror costs or a telescope that I'm gonna buy off the street or from a manufacturer. So give me some comparison as to the additional quality that these mirrors are gonna offer me as opposed to what I'm buying commercially.
One of the objectives I have is to be able to. At the focus Hartman test, any telescope I want, when I'm at a star party, I'm gonna do that C8. I'm gonna do that 16-inch, I'm gonna do this scope. And what I'm hoping to do is get a collection of Hartman tests from commercial privately made scopes. And get a bulk data. And at that point, we're gonna be able to tell if this easy Hartman test and my no Hartman test are blowing those guys out of the water. My guess is we're gonna be blowing them out of the water.
I was going to suggest that he needs to have a bodyguard on entourage with him, you know, because people don't want to hear that I have a bad mirror in that telescope. Chase you out.
We had our mirror tested and you were there, Lonnie,
Yeah.
you know, we were more sweating than. You know, we're
Yeah.
going, where are we?
Do you really want to know? Yeah.
Yeah, we've been looking through and going, ooh, and, you know, but we're excited to get the test results back
Yeah,
and what we can, and we know where we need to go
right.
at that point. And to go, wow, that's what they're looking.
Well, I don't like to star test people's telescope and tell them what I think, unless they ask me to. Are you sure you want me to do it? Yes, yeah, please. And then I let them have it. I say, this thing has this. It's gonna be the same with the Noel Hartman test. If somebody wants me to Hartman test here, C8, sure, I'll do it. But you may not want to know what to find out. The repeatability and precision of the test that we're doing now are unbelievable. They are just better than anything I've ever seen, and I don't see me ever doing another test. It would be ridiculous. We're there. We literally are there.
I have a fun line when I test somebody's mirror, I'll look at it and I'm using the Ronchi screen on a telescope and the observing. And I'll say, I really hate to tell you this, but it's a great mirror. And you can just just take your time on the butts.
You got a perfect mirror and you stick it in a telescope. There's something else that's googling it up.
Elevation #1, yeah.
Might take you this, that. Check it a couple times. Oh, that's working now.
Yeah.
And it's not always the mirror. Matter of fact, that 30-inch I did for the observatory in Oregon, I told them, I don't think it's your mirror, I think it's your cell. Well, do the mirror anyway. Okay, you do the cell. I made them do a new cell and I did the mirror. And they said it works a lot better. Well, I don't think it's because of what I did on the mirror. I think it's because of what they did on the cell.
Just a quick comment on what Mike was saying. You know, our progress as amateurs has been really hard because the professionals have done it. They're way ahead of us, but they won't tell us anything. I talked to the Mirror Lab. They have this reverse Hartman test. It's really cool. They have a computer screen and they put the mask on the screen, little dots on the screen, project it to the mirror and take a photograph. Same thing, it's just reversed. And I wrote 2 or 3 of the scientists down there, the mirror makers, and none of them would answer my questions. So, you know, they,
Or did they all die?
No, they're there.
Oh, did anybody at home have any questions? Are you still awake?
Can you bring them up so we can see them? Right.
Hand over
Cell phones.
there. One.
How sad.
Oh, well,
When are you gonna start testing in a cold storage freezer to avoid your temperature problems?
the temperature of the test, as long as the mirror has stabilized to that temperature.
Yeah.
If I do a 90 or a 30-degree test, as long as it's stable, it should come out the same.
Okay.
At Tinsley, with the interferometer, they first put the mirror in the interferometer, and then they let it stabilize in the interferometer. And then they vacuum charge the interferometer environment, and they let it sit in the vacuum for a week before doing the interferometer test. And then they do thousands of interferograms, rotate the mirror, and thousands of interferograms, then they average them all up. But they won't declare temporary loss unless they've done it in the back and it's stabilized. We are there. Or are we going to be there?
Adjust
What,
up and
yeah.
down, or do they just swivel in the center? They stick here.
these guys,
Yeah,
yeah, wiffle trays, yeah, it swivels there.
right. And that's it, huh?
Yeah.
It's not set, and then you could adjust out to
Correct.
22 or
For
something.
the diameter.
Yeah.
I can also adjust the wheel, the little bearings out further too. For the larger mirrors, they're wider.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Keep the angle the same, yeah.
Right, okay, it's sitting right. Okay, you got a whole screw up right there. What is this? Wood.
I think it's just, yeah, it's just pine on that one.
Thing, this mirror. I made for James Shookneck, and he's taking it home with him today. And he's got the data sheet there, if I can steal that data sheet. So it's not as good as the one that Lonnie was showing, but it's down the middle on most of the average is almost perfect. I can't remember the screw ratio on this, I sent it to you. 985. 985, okay, so it's a really good mirror, and it's finally getting out of my shop.
What are you putting in this and that? Yeah, okay, you're gonna do this.
Yeah, we're gonna spray silver this when I get my game on that, and you do know that it won't last a long time, so. You may wanna wait until the scope's almost ready to go before spray silver again, or we can all spray silver again.
When are you going to?
I think that's me, is it?
Did I get that?
I turned mine off.
I still have to do your secondary mirror, though, it's progress right now, get the secondary mirror game in. Okay, let's kill this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the wiffle design there basically has 2 points on both sides? Did you comment on replacing that with just a single point on both sides? How would that affect? Excuse me?
All that.
Kind of a whipple, just have one thing.
Can you repeat it?
Refer to the stone.
Yeah, instead of having the two balls on both sides, could you, if you replaced where it pivots just with a single point?
Okay, so if you have 1 point here, 1 point here,
Correct.
it does equalize. But we have found that if you do 22.5 degrees and have 2 on this side pivoting, 2 on this side pivoting, it really neutralizes the forces better. We're not the only ones to do that. Almost everybody's doing that. JP Astrocraft is the absolute authority on how to support the side of a mirror. Go to their website, you could see their side wiffles. They're excellent.
Mhm. There's one company I've seen that actually does that with a single point.
Well, a lot of people do 2 points. A lot of people do straps. A lot of people do wires. The JP Astrocraft and Mike Lockwood really did a laser imagery analysis on it, and the wiffles that JP Astrocraft have are by far the the winners of that game. So I just don't mess around. That's the way I do them on all of them.
Cool.
My new mirror stand has rails going down like this that I can slide to whatever size mirror I'm doing, and then I can adjust the wiffles so that on every one, and then I have steel roller skate bearings that touch the center of the mirror or the center of gravity of the mirror. And my theory is I don't have any forward or back forces or right and left forces. That's all it takes to completely destroy this test. It's so accurate. Lonnie uses balls.
Are those
And,
factory balls, so to speak, or do you have those machined?
They're just little nylon balls on a
They roll in ball
Fair
socket.
roller. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
ball and socket.
Just commercial, or did you?
They are a master car.
McMaster car?
Yes.
Okay. I love that company.
Check out a website called cruxus.com.
Cruxus?
CRUXIS, I believe. Uh-huh.
I'm wondering if there's an advantage to this because on
They've
the one that-
done the research on this.
on the one that Mike and I use, they're free to roll forward and back, but not sideways. This is free to roll in any direction. So this might have an advantage.
Yeah.
You want your mirror leaning back just a little bit because you don't want it going slip. Of course, it's not my mirror, so I don't care.
Not you. Is it paid for? Yes, that's the question.
$7,000. I'm kidding.
Okay.
I've had this mirror for 100 years. Okay, thanks, guys.
All right.
Okay, the moment you've been all waiting for, Jerry has the tabulations and he's going to make an announcement.
So. Nobody was brave enough to write in their own names or anyone else's name, so basically. Tim's going to be our next president for 2023. I'll stick my head in the noose and be his VP. Gary's treasurer again. Eric, brave enough to be secretary again. Rebecca newsletter. Well, the members at large, you have John, Jason, and Bill. John got 7 votes. Bill got 10 votes and Jason got 5 votes, so. It's hard to say, Bill, John, you're on the hook. Congratulations, guys.
What was that?
Baldwin?
You pulled from out from under the table.
Guys, I think I'm supposed to finalize this here. And those that have been voted, any discussion, complaints, anything else? No one's listening, I guess. Okay, so with that being said, is there a motion for the nominees to be elected?
So moved.
Okay, and let's take a vote on it and then we'll close it. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Very good. Okay. And motion to approve, yes. I guess.
Yeah.
Jeff, what's our program next month?
Can I stop recording?
Yeah, I think you.
Back here or?